Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we're going to be sitting down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching. Both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. Daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing. We have Stagecoach, directed by John Ford. We then have X, Pearl, and newly released now in theaters, MaXXXine, all directed by Ty West. So I guess stay tuned. We have a niche kind of horror trilogy, and then one of just the most important westerns and borderline movies of all the cinema coming up. So it's another week on the Daily Ratings. Let's see what Vin has to say. Enjoy the show. Mr. Vincent Daly, how's it going, buddy?
Tommy boy, how's it going?
It's going okay on this side of the table. How was your week of films here?
A little bit of a scramble. We got Stagecoach, like you said, probably one of the more important movies.
It's
in all
super
cinema.
important.
Yeah.
Almost deserves its own episode.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, this was obviously seen it once before with you, but it was great revisiting it because I knew I already liked this movie. Kind of now with so many episodes of the podcast under the belt, I was able to really appreciate what John Ford did and whatnot. And Ty West, the new kid on the block. Maybe not that new, but this trilogy of movies we actually held off on covering in 2022, early days of the podcast. And we have the payoff. The final entry is here. So I've been excited to cover these.
Okay.
I don't know if I was a massive fan of the trilogy, but definitely interesting movies. I think my takeaway coming away from this week is that Ty West is
up and coming.
He's got an interesting vision. He pulls on a lot of interesting areas for his influences, and especially for MaXXXine, there was some director's study that you and I did earlier this year that came in very handy in spotting the influences that he was pulling from. So,
okay, all right. Well, I mean, yeah, it's just a weird trilogy, and it is small. It's niche, and there's the release schedule is weird too.
Yeah, right.
It's a trilogy, and the first two movies came out in the same year.
Right.
Which is weird. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It wasn't on my radar, the horror trilogy, but. And then, of course, we have Stagecoach, which really could be its own episode.
Maybe a John Ford special. Well, maybe that's a re-edit episode where we could do this, we could do Liberty Valance, and then maybe what's the other trilogy or the unofficial trilogy that he does?
The Calvary trilogy.
Yeah,
the Calvary trilogy. Yeah, but he's got boy. I mean, I was listening to kind of a podcast on him. And his story, and it's just crazy. The amount of films they used to pump out in his 5-year period, he directed 30 movies.
Wow.
Because that was before kind of the talkies came in.
Yeah.
The way Hollywood was in the early days, like in the 19-teens, you know, it's crazy to hear about.
Yeah.
But before we get started, it was just an hour ago, it came on the Hollywood Reporter, Kevin Costner's Horizon 2 pulled from August release in theaters after the film flops. Which I actually think is the way to go.
So more breathing room in between
exactly.
the release. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
So his theater production or whatever like that, and then New Line Cinema is distributing it. We're just like, we gotta do something here.
Yeah.
Because I think, because we talked about last week, it's just, what are you gonna do? What are they gonna do? If 1 was bad, 2 looks even worse as far as box office goes.
Yeah, we saw half of 2 in the end of 1. With that montage at the end.
I think it's smart. They'll pull it, and then it'll come out to digital release. I think it's going to be end of the month. It's already going to be, you can rent it on Amazon.
Part 1, that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then let that breathe. And then since Costner owns it, he can shop around on Netflix and Max. And if he sets up a deal where they push it out in front of everyone's face, they can it can get some buzz. People can take their time and watch it. They can go for multiple seats, and then I don't know, hit us with like a March or May release for Chapter 2.
Boy.
It would make more sense than coming out with August right away.
Does this affect the prospect of it being a 4-part?
I think it affects everything.
Okay, good.
It affects everything. For
I'm
sure.
glad. Hopefully the 4-part juggling act kind of crumbles, because I feel like if 2 is already set in stone, maybe they pull it for some re-edit time.
Right.
Not that we were on record of hating that type of stuff, but if it's that much of a mess, we can, give them a little breathing room there. But maybe 3 is just like a totally different direction. They can,
We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out. Hopefully, get some new life online though.
Yeah.
Once when it goes to streaming. But anyway, that just came in, so I wanted because we were talking about it last week. Okay. All right. Any opening notes or no? We're good to go.
Just one more thing with John Ford.
Yes.
Apparently, like 90 or something movies of his from that silent film era are just like completely lost too. Which
Yes.
more and more as we watch old films, I don't know. I find myself caring about preservation, media preservation, a lot more, just because the fact that a director this good
Has that many,
and they're like gone. It's just.
And apparently there's one. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them were kind of shit.
Yeah.
Now, apparently there's one of them. He claims that he made like an epic. He made a war epic, and that one was like apparently a great film, and that's lost, and that's trying to be found. Because there was that stretch where he was just like, he was getting all the cheap ones, just those 3-day westerns where you just shoot it in studio.
That's the term I was looking for. I know you mentioned the 3-day western type of thing before.
That was extremely popular until about the mid-20s. And even though they were still in the silent era for westerns, that's when production started to get big. He kind of expanded the western budget. Basically, it was
interesting.
Him and another guy. They were working on the Iron Horse, I believe it was called, which is a very well-known early John Ford Western. And it was the first time that a major Hollywood movie was made outside of Hollywood. Like the first time on location. Or there was another film as well. I can't remember. There was one film that they were like, here's Paramount or something, or one of the original studios gave him 2 reels of film, and it was him and Harry Carey kind of doing it together. Okay. They shot 2 reels of film, but they didn't want to make a short film. They wanted to make a feature length.
Right.
So then they told the studio that they felt the reels fell in the water and they needed 3 more. So they had a 5-reel actual full length movie.
I love that.
They got fired on the spot as soon as the head of the studio found out. As soon as the head watched the film, hired him right back.
Wow.
And it gave him more money to go make another film.
Oh, that's awesome.
So just old school stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess we'll jump back. I guess we can get started because now I've got all this John Ford stuff in my head.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
And it's just-
absolutely.
I don't know if I want to just vomit John Ford all over the place.
Right. And there'll be plenty of more John Ford movies that we get to in this type of theme of a month.
Right.
So I'm sure we can sprinkle it throughout.
So basically, we're jumping back to 1939, and the reason why this film is so important is that it is kind of John Wayne has arrived in Hollywood. So I was talking to Vin the other week where I think he had 80, 85, close to 90 films.
I counted 78.
Okay, there you go.
Yep.
So 78 films John Wayne came out with before Stagecoach in 1939. 78 films. But they were these short westerns. A lot of those were bit parts. And some of them he almost was leading, but they were silent films or they were just they were B movies. Again, it always shocks me to think that B movies were made back then. You would just think it was very expensive for the film.
Right.
No, cheapos were being made constantly.
Yeah.
And that were these 3-day westerns. They would be start and finish within 3 days, wrap production, and they would just be pumping these out. And John Wayne was even part of this one, like 17-picture, not trilogy, but 17-picture like continuation film type thing.
Wow.
But basically, when it comes to actual big Hollywood, 1939 Stagecoach was the first time that he kind of came to be. He was recognized by everyone and became a household name. Stagecoach is also John Ford's first Western with speaking in it.
Oh, okay.
So that was a big deal for him. He had other speaking movies and other talkie or two before
but not
this.
Westerns.
But not Westerns. Yeah, 1939. It's an old movie. It's an hour and 36 minutes. And Vin, why don't you break down the film? Obviously, I gave it a fresh watch as well. We can take it back and forth. But let's get into Stagecoach.
Yeah. Well, starting John Wayne July with this breakout role, I think is a great starting point because it really is a good film. This is referred to as one of an all-time greats. registered with the National Film Registry for preservation. Yeah, I mean, kind of an anomaly that you think of John Wayne as this, I don't know, no, I wouldn't say electric, but it's John Wayne. He's got star power on screen when you see him. Nonetheless, 78 movies under his belt, by my count, before this happened. The only film I could find to be a contender of this as a breakout role title was 1930's The Big Trail.
Yeah.
So maybe we can add that to the list to check it out. I don't know if that's silent or not.
I think that's a great question. I have no idea.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's even like starring in it. So
he looks so young. He looks great.
He does.
He looks very cool in that one.
He does.
He really starts to fill out then.
Yeah, right. He becomes John Wayne.
Yeah, I forget. It was John Ford's first talking movie.
Okay.
That he found, and it was about the Army-Navy and football rivalry. So when he shot there, he wanted football players, and so he went to the local, California team.
Okay.
And that's where he found Wayne.
Oh,
and specifically
wow.
John Wayne and Ward Bond, who is a common character in a lot of Ford films, and John Wayne. Like Bond and John Wayne were best friends, basically, and they took liking to the movies the most on set.
Sure.
And then John Ford kind of took him under his wing a little bit and kept them in mind. I don't think... But The Big Trail, I forget who directed that, but definitely that's a good point to throw in that with John Wayne.
Yeah, that was the only one that I found in research to just have a contender, to be a contender for the spot of like, hey, where did John Wayne really make his impact as a star? But this is an important one to cover because, like we've been talking about, this is one of John Ford's most famous films, if only for sparking his collaboration with John Wayne. We touched on their collaboration when we covered The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And in short, Ford is up there with some of the most influential directors of all time. When we talked about earlier in the year, with the new wave of directors like De Palma and Scorsese and whatnot, a lot of them are learning from the best.
It's crazy. And
that best is John Ford. There's a lot of international directors during that time that make a equal impact in their various regions. Akira Kurosawa is in like a similar kind of time period.
Kurosawa says that he looked to John Ford for inspiration.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Europe, I think Ingmar Bergman. There's we talked off mic about this, but there's that Indian director that we were looking into for maybe doing a study. All of them look to John Ford. I feel like one little connective tissue that I always laugh at now watching John Ford's movies is because I think about David Lynch playing him in The Fabelmans. Which is just such a great little moment that I don't know how John Ford actually sounded in real life, but now I just match him as David Lynch.
I think Lynch gets him down pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. I hope at least they're both equally as curt, that they're just like really straightforward and to the point.
I don't like John Ford, the man. I just respect the director.
Sure.
The man, I'm not the biggest fan of.
Okay.
The only big director that hates John Ford is Quentin Tarantino. Cannot stand John Ford, and for good reasons, actually.
I'm side-eyeing Tarantino with Hateful Eight after watching this, after watching Stagecoach again. So I think he's gonna check his influences.
But one more note on the directors.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I mean, truly, Scorsese loves him.
Yeah.
What's Spielberg? What's his face? Spielberg literally says that before he makes a movie, he will always watch 1 to 2 John Ford films. Orson Welles has said, when I think a great director is, I always look to the 3 best: John Ford, and John Ford.
That's awesome. I hope he was drunk when he said that.
So it's nuts how influential he was in Hollywood. It's absolutely insane.
Absolutely. Really a mark of quality. This film, it will surprise you with how dated it feels. It feels like a movie from 1939. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like the character work here and what is able to be done in the story it has the marks of any great movie, whether that be modern day or in this kind of golden age era when we have the classics, so to speak, coming out. Like the tagline for the film describes, Stagecoach is a powerful story of 9 strange people. The structure of this story is an odyssey where we meet many characters forced to cooperate on their journey across the West. Brought together for many different reasons, a stagecoach filled with a full deck of characters leaves town heading into Apache territory. Their reasons for diving headfirst into danger vary, but they all need to get to New Mexico one way or another. To worsen matters, the leader Geronimo has announced his claim on the trail, making running into violence only a matter of time. With determination and blind luck, the crew sets out for their adventure, hoping to make it out alive. Really, my focus and my appreciation, especially on the second rewatch, is all around cast on this.
Yeah.
And I feel like that plays into how much I like every one of these 9 characters, how much I enjoy the performances, but it really does boil down to the characters and the story itself.
Like the development, the character development. Yeah.
And I think that's what surprises me, too, where it's like, not only is this a lot more dynamic than, I don't know, not to even throw shade to John Wayne, but like a singular John Wayne type of Western where it's like, he's the hero, he's got a lady, maybe he's got a cool villain, but that's about it.
Right.
These 9 characters, there's so much going on here to keep your attention and to kind of overcome maybe some of the old vibes of a 1939 film.
And you're right. I mean, it almost feels older than 1939.
Yeah.
Where The Wizard of Oz came out in the same year.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
But yeah, it's crazy how well defined the characters are and how quickly that happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because then we get off in the stagecoach and it's just like, oh, okay, we're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this does a lot for story structure with all of them being contained by the goal of getting through this hostile territory. And what surprised me again on this rewatch is just how strong every character is. And even though they might seem surface level stereotypes or kind of Western archetypes at first, all of them come out with like, maybe not, you can't really call it like an arc, but like development and little nuggets and details that you pick up on through their interactions alone, not through clunky exposition, not through like a narrator from back in the day or something like that.
That's true too.
Yeah. It's all through them acting their asses off in this tight little stage car.
Yeah.
Our character breakdown is the following. We got 9 to go through. Dallas, a prostitute kicked out of town. Doc Boone, an alcoholic booted out in a similar way. The proper Southern belle, Lucy. Hatfield, her gentleman suitor and chronic gambler. I love that he's just like, yeah, I'm a gambler. Also,
great look too, by the way.
Yeah, my personal fave. He's played by John Carradine, and just
a solid look.
Absolutely, just as cool as ice. Mr. Peacock, a whiskey salesman. Gatewood, a slippery banker on the run. Buck, our buffoon stage driver. Marshall Wilcox, riding shotgun and keeping everyone in line. And last but not least, the cowboy Ringo Kid. What a name.
Love the name.
Played none other by the Duke himself. Ringo Kid, just great.
I would let the name my kid Ringo, but everybody would just look at the Beatles. And
Oh,
it would
so
be
true.
a lifelong tragedy of having to explain people. No.
No, it's not
from
the worst
the 1939 movie Stagecoach. It's John Wayne's name.
And they're like,
But Ringo Kid, absolutely.
Yeah.
I will say what's crazy is top billing for the film,
Yes.
which for 1939, extremely impressive, was actually Claire Trevor, the girl who plays Dallas the prostitute.
Absolutely.
Top billing.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, I noted the same thing because I was like, and that's, I think, what kind of spurred me to just kind of second guess our own kind of, cumulative John Wayne knowledge.
Yeah.
Of just saying like, all right, well, what really is like first, Because you look online, everyone says Stagecoach, but there's other little nuggets out there.
It definitely is, yeah.
Yeah. Folks, this cast of characters, I think, is 100% the selling point of the film, as all of these characters are surprisingly strong. Containing them in this tight environment forces them to interact, and by the end, everyone has a handful of moments that makes it really worth telling a story around these 9 characters. We've talked many times in the past about the worthiness of a story or a script, the most important time in all these characters' lives. I don't know if I can say that much, but I feel like their interaction and the growth the characters have by clashing and cooperating with each other really gets across like this was worth following 9 characters, not getting lost in the weeds or not getting, kind of wires tangled with it. All 9 characters stand out in my mind for this. So, and folks, something that also kind of came to mind around this thought of just such a strong movie and such a large cast is if you happen to enjoy the influx of a lot of these whodunit revival movies with such a sporting big cast, I feel like this is a great Western to give a shot. Sheerly for how well the spotlight bounces around to give everyone a meaningful time on screen. It's not just like pity time. I feel like every character gets a little bit of a meaningful spotlight at one point or another in the film.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, and it does help that they're so contained, and that's definitely helpful. It's funny to think, though, today, because this feels like an ensemble movie because you have 9 different characters. But as far as the cast goes, we have ensemble flicks now. It's just, okay, how many big names can we get?
Oh, sure.
And then that's what sells the movie.
Sure.
It's the names, and then maybe this one's dressed funny, this one talks funny. This one,
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep,
Where this one is actually just like good writing in a good
Absolutely.
in a good movie.
Absolutely.
It is a little electric, yeah.
And that's why I think it's driven by the characters. Yeah, the characters are the
100%.
actors. Yeah, it's John Wayne. But there's something to it that the characters themselves, I find, it's meaningful time with them on screen.
Yeah, definitely.
The tone isn't squeaky clean either. The group is at odds with each other, which helps tension. Sometimes that's played off comedically, like with Doc Boone being kind of an alcoholic doctor. But most of the times it complicates things to keep things interesting, especially interesting when pretty much a lot of the time they're either in a stagecoach or they're parking the stagecoach.
Changing horses.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like that's, again, an important element in the mix here for the story to, actually make it, worth our time. In a lot of ways, this feels like an extremely early predecessor to Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight, in the sense that the setup for that Western is take 8 individuals that probably hate each other's guts and put them in a cabin.
Yeah.
Here, it's a little bit more optimistic than that. It's not going to end like a Hateful Eight ends, but there's something to it there that I feel like I was kind of side-eyeing Tarantino and being like, man, it's just always
on
pulling.
the shoulder of giants.
He's always pulling.
On the shoulder of giants, like we always say.
Yeah. As far as the hook, though, this announcement of the Apache Warpath is, at first, a bit cartoonish. I think that's where I was at with my first watch of this.
Like the opening
well.
scene of the film, or
opening scene when they get the not the telegram, but the is it Morse code? What is it?
a telegram through Morse code, basically. Yeah.
Basically, like this announcement that Geronimo is attacking the trail and whatnot. I thought I was like,
It happens. That's the very first scene.
Yeah,
and it's a quickened opening, and the cut's rough, and it's funny because it's just like, ooh, I just wish it started a little stronger.
Yeah, I think hearing it now, though, I was happy for it because it was like, at least it sets the stake. It's not just like, oh, they're going on this journey, and we don't know if something's going to happen.
Right.
It's kind of setting the stage as being like, if you go on this path, you're going to get attacked. And I liked that, at least
matter of time
tension,
yeah.
you know? It's putting a pressure cooker on the 9 personalities.
And I like that at times, too. It just plays second fiddle to another overarching story going on, too.
Absolutely.
Like,
the
there's
mini
layers
dramas.
there.
Yeah. Whether that's an argument between the people or something that's going on that develops in the plot. Absolutely. I would say let's move on to Wayne. This is why we're covering it in John Wayne July. This has one of my favorite hero shots, and definitely in the Hall of Fame of an iconic shot, period. John Wayne first comes into frame. The camera zooms in as he racks his big loop Henry rifle, and instantaneously you just feel the star power on screen.
It's wild.
It almost doesn't look like it belongs in the film. It looks... I don't know. It looks all artificial in ways.
It almost looks too good. Because even as it zooms in, it takes a minute to get unblurry a little bit. I mean, it's like divine intervention almost. Because it's so crazy how one of the biggest actors of all time has this kind of entrance.
Yeah, right, exactly. The amount of foresight that was given to this shot. It's like if they could see in the future and be like, oh yeah, John Wayne's going to be around for a minute.
And again, he was in 78 films.
Yeah.
But not like this, not definitely not like this.
Yeah.
And it just I don't know how they came up with that shot. I don't know if John Ford just knew in the back of his head it's going to be this guy from now on. Very impressive, though.
Yeah, and this is a shot, folks, that you might have seen because it is used in other things and often played in backgrounds if, like, a Western needs to be playing in the background of something in another movie or another show. I really can't understate this. I mean, it really is. I mean, we don't really go into praise of just one specific shot, but it really is a great.
It's like 2 seconds long.
It's a great shot. Even the
his
blur,
facial expression. Yeah.
Just every ounce of it. The blur of the camera coming into focus almost gives it a half second to then, when it does focus on John Wayne's face, it's just like, wow, wow.
It's meaningful.
Electric.
The only thing I don't like is the 5 seconds leading up to that scene.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a gunshot that goes off, and we should just cut to John Wayne right away, but we don't. We cut back to the cavalry, and then we go back to the stage and then John Wayne.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason for that. It's to show that the cavalry's further away, and that's why they're not right there.
Yeah.
It's to show that they're crossing the river still, so that's why they're not up by the stage.
Sure.
But regardless, I just think it breaks. Gunshot, you should have immediate John Wayne, but that's it's pulling strings. They're pulling whatever.
Yeah.
For the birds.
For the birds. Also, like when we first watched this, and like you opened up, Tom, it's so shocking how young John Wayne is here, and still has all the swagger.
Big time.
Of even like his later career. I feel like he's such a presence on screen, and I feel like it's just some serious star power. Not to mention, Wayne gets one hell of a cool shootout towards the end of this film. That is no surprise that this is kind of his big break. I love this last action scene, not because the action itself is super great, but rather the build-up. It creates such importance in the moment, and that's where you can really feel the hand of a creator like John Ford, understanding that he probably can't make a shootout, I don't know, maybe as electric as he wants, or maybe there were not those type of action sequences in film just yet.
Right. Could be running out of time, running out of film.
Sure.
It could be weird stuff. When we're back in 1939, it could be any of that.
Yeah. But this last shootout that he has, there's a use of silence. The audio track is stripped, and it almost creates a, I don't know. I mean, obviously, like a high noon type of feeling.
Oh, for sure.
Of, well, you're walking out of the bar, you got to face the the music. But when it comes down to it, just how the silence of very much a 1939 film where the score has been blaring and it's been heroic and whatnot.
Yeah.
It gets stripped in a way that I was like, wow, this is a really cool shootout for a Western period, no less just for this or just for John Wayne.
It's a great bookend for when you start with him with that opening scene that we just talked about and ending with that, or or ending close to it at least. I think it's shot great, and it really. It also made me say, I'm glad that this was black and white, because his lighting and shadow work when we get to town, I actually really love.
Absolutely. You see that a lot with the relationship with Dallas. There's a lot of just like black silhouettes.
Yes.
When they're parked in the one holdout. Yeah, just really cool. I guess it really didn't occur to me that it might be in color. I just kind of assume. Also,
well,
I get spoiled by Liberty Valance too, because that's like 62, and it's like
and
that's
it's still black and white.
Yeah. So it's like,
and it's funny. I heard
they're all just in black and white.
And I remember listening to, and I mean, it is 1939, because what made Wizard of Oz was the first in color, or the first to have a length in color.
No, not the first in color. It's been a while since I've researched it, but I believe the innovation with Wizard of Oz is more so around the fact that it went from black and white and then color.
Okay, gotcha.
Kind of the transition there. But
still, you're right. I guess 39 there was some color going on.
I think
not
so.
a lot.
Because,
again,
it's certainly not a lot.
This is John Ford's first Western with talking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I always remember watching a video, a clip of Lee Marvin saying that how much he just prefers black and white. And it's classic Hollywood. You know, you have a new stuff coming in and that the old schoolers just don't like it. But one thing he said, he was just like, he loves the shadow work and he likes to build suspense with that way. And when I was watching Stagecoach, it's just like, there it is. I know what that guy's talking about now.
Absolutely. You really do feel it in how some of these scenes are crafted. And again, not to just needlessly praise John Ford, but you watch this and you see where this is not like an amateur piece. This is like done by someone that is seasoned in their craft.
Yeah.
In a big way.
Even the speed feels good. We didn't have too much. We might have had a little bit of fast forwarding, not fast forwarding, like quick and pace for the horseback riding and stuff. And we were talking about a lot of that with some of the bike riding stuff that we were been doing. With the motorcycles.
Yep.
A lot of time, old school westerns will just speed up those reels to make it seem like the horses are going faster. John Ford was someone. It seems like he likes real speed.
Yeah.
And I was listening to some crazy stories with this guy. I mean, putting a baby's life in danger. Crazy stuff, but it feels good. It doesn't take you out of it, really. In some of those fast stagecoach scenes.
Well, speaking of danger, I mean, I feel like this was a great demonstration of the old industry of stunt horses. Because, like, some horses take some
stunt
double.
men.
Yeah. Here's a quick question. I don't know if you know it, but was John Wayne doing his own stunts? Because there's some impressive stunt work towards we'll call it the second last.
Yeah, he was doing
shootout.
basic stuff. Anything when he's on the stagecoach and moving and dealing with the horses, that was stuntmen.
Okay.
And there's the one famous scene. Well, there's two famous scenes, really. But the one going full speed from horse to stagecoach horse.
Yeah.
And then another one
That's
that
the one
a
I'm
guy
thinking of.
gets shot and then releases, and then the stagecoach goes over him.
Yep.
And he goes between the wheels. Like the famous Hollywood stuff.
Yeah. Well, either way, I think impressive stunt work then.
Yeah,
I was curious if, I don't know, I guess my thought was maybe, was Wayne young enough? Was the studio industry young enough that he would have been like wanting to do his own work or something like that?
Probably.
Yeah.
Just not that crazy.
Yeah. Because there's some intense stuff. So I would say I'm coming away very positive with this, though. Again, for characters, first and foremost. Let me talk about a little bit of an elephant in the room. I mean, this movie is considered an all-timer. 95 on Metacritic, 2 Oscar wins, and inducted into the National Film Registry. Probably the best accolade out of all of those, even piggybacking off of our brief comments on film preservation. On a second rewatch here under the belt, I can totally see where the critical opinion is coming from on this. The consensus is that the film transcends the Western genre. And I totally see where they're coming from with that. For me, what I was able to compare this to is my experience with Liberty Valance. Besides it being connected with John Ford, I felt like both are stories that are good enough on their own and are only elevated by the Western setting.
That's great way to put it, Ben.
Whether that Western setting is creating tension in the inner drama, whether that's just kind of, in this case with Stagecoach, just kind of doing a framework to characters. So we're like, all right, yeah, this is the gambler, this is the drunk doctor, it's Western archetypes. But the story itself is that good that it could almost stand apart from its Western stylings. Transcends, it's a pretty fancy word. I don't know if it's transcending, it's still a Western, but I get where they're coming from. Really, the only area I feel like I don't see eye to eye is a little bit around the film's pacing, which is just a product of its age. It is a 1939 film.
Too slow for you.
Not too slow.
Not enough going on screen. Too old on screen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Too old. It comes down to there's a point in the film that they have to stop and they have to get Doc Boone sober for him to be a doctor, and
I love this scene.
You do love it.
Friggin', are you kidding me? I thought that.
I like the scene. I just feel like it goes on a little bit more like they're playing cards. Then it's just like, all right, come on, is he sober or not? Well, just little things like that. I feel like
sober, by the way.
Yeah,
Drink a bunch of hot coffee until you have to throw up constantly. It was ridiculous.
I know. Oh, and John Wayne looks so ridiculous next to him. He gets the splash of the water, and you just see him taking the full arm length back. Then it's great. But yeah, I feel like that's just the area where I'm not coming away from this with like, this is a 95, best movie ever.
Yep. Absolutely.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously you're a huge John Wayne fan.
Mm-hmm.
This is a legendary Western. How does this even rank up against other of your favorite
I have
Westerns?
to see. So this is the fourth time I watched it, and this is probably I feel like I'm enjoying this more and more and more.
Yeah.
This film.
I would agree.
Because the first time I was like, ooh, this is an old movie, and I can appreciate it for what it is. It introduces John Wayne. And now the more I watch, I'm just like, oh shit, this is like slowly creeping up into top 6, top 5 John Wayne movies of all time for me.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of movies, so that's actually it's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just actually, even with the age that is all over this film, coming to appreciate still the film itself more. You go into it probably thinking, okay, most people just give it a 1 shoe.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then I went into it just like, okay, this is going to get 2 shoes. And I ended up still just like really liking it on this last watch.
Yeah. I feel like there's just again, it boils down to characters that I find that I not necessarily wanted more time with, but just was grateful of the story that I unpacked and their relationships that I unpacked. I feel like when it comes to the age angle, not that I'm suggesting remaking a John Ford film, almost God forbid, but I do think a dream project for me would be a modern take on a story like this, where its priorities are somewhere equally between strong character focus and the variety in Western archetypes. And if anything, Horizon was coming to mind, where I was just like, look at how this is juggled. Very simple story, very straightforward, but focuses on characters and is making me want more. I feel like it's able to still even cover like this, like grandiose. These are the different walks of life in, the Western setting. That again, not to needlessly shit on Horizon
it's
and
just
Kevin
a totally
Costner,
different
but
movie.
yeah,
It's a totally different movie.
He should have just watched some John Ford movies.
Probably just watch his own films. That's really different.
Yeah, exactly. But even still, I can't deny how great this was as a rewatch, and much of that in the quality of simple building blocks of the story and performances. And in that sense, the film really is ageless. I've given a couple different little hooks if you're not into Westerns and where this can work for you. I really do think this one is truly worth a shot, folks, especially if you're not into Westerns, because it is so fundamental. And I feel like if you follow the podcast at all, it's about understanding, the foundation of what are going to be the Shoulders of Giants. We're going to go ahead and give Stagecoach 1939 and 81.
Whoa! Are you kidding me, man?
That's 2 John Fords. That's 2 John Waynes in 80 plus.
Oh my gosh!
Because Liberty Valance.
It has taken 10 years. It has taken 10 years to open your eyes. Oh!
No,
my Wayne Padawan. Wow. 81%, fantastic, Vin. Absolutely fantastic. You just knocked my Cowboy boots off.
Damn, knocked them all.
Wow. I wasn't expecting any of that. I'm so happy to hear that you enjoyed yourself.
I really did. Even to the point that I kind of felt like watching it again. And I feel like that's always the mark of a good film, especially with how pressed my film watching schedule is, and how much it has to like onto the next one. I really did feel like, wow, this was like an excellent use of the time to spend with these characters.
Bro, that's incredible. 81%. And as I said, I go and think, most people will say this is 1 shoe. I think I'm walking in basically saying this is going to be 2 shoes easy. I just was surprised with how much I enjoyed it. And this gets 2 shoes, 1 lace.
That's excellent.
An extra notch, which totally makes sense with your 81%.
Excellent.
Yeah. Give it a watch. I have to give a shout out. Vin and I used to be part of a vinyl club. Its members were me and Vin.
Yeah. Started as a birthday originally, I think.
Something like that.
And then it was monthly.
But basically, 1 month I give Vin a vinyl. The next month, Vin gives me a vinyl. Back and forth. So the one day it was my turn, and I open it up, and Vin gives me the soundtrack to Stagecoach, the movie.
Yep.
We continue to open up to find it as a Japanese print. So all of the writing on the vinyl is in Japanese.
Which is crazy.
There's also cool artistic stylings and like pencil drawings of John Ford.
That
looks badass.
He looks awesome.
We play the record, and what we find is it's soundtrack to the film. It is just the film on vinyl.
On wax.
And I cannot tell you, I told him this last week, probably out of all of the vinyls he ever gave me, and out of all the ones I bought myself, I think it is my most cherished vinyl. That I have Stagecoach, the movie, on vinyl, Japanese print.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
It makes me think, like, was that the solution, like, before Laserdisc or before, like, what? I don't know. Like,
I'll have
the
to
first
check the
kind of
date
home
on
video?
If I can find the date on it. And then not only that, Included with it, in the booklet and everything like that comes with it, kind of that vinyl book that you can kind of flip through, is the transcript to the entire film.
The whole script.
In English.
Right. Great.
An incredible piece, though, and I forever cherish that.
That's great. That's great.
Very happy to own that.
Yeah. and as far as like unique vinyls, unique records to have, I don't, yeah.
You're not going to get more unique than that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got some unique ones. You've got some unique ones for
Right.
sure. That is
Yeah.
up there. That is up there.
I still love the character drawings of John Ford in that.
It's cool.
They make
I mean,
him
if I
look
love
like-
the man, I would get a tattoo of it. Only like the director, not the man.
Yeah. That's the same kind of qualification with naming your kid Ringo. Be like, no. It's not Ringo Starr.
And it's Ringo Kid too.
Yeah,
His middle name Kid. You know.
Yeah.
It's such a cool name. It's freaking
It's
Beatles
great.
ruining everything. All right, let's get on. Oh, by the way, that was our.
Or rare hot take on the Beatles.
No,
Usually
no.
there's
I'm a Beatles fan.
Yeah, they're talking about someone else ruining the Beatles.
Okay, 40 minutes in. Woo, boy.
Whoa, that's long.
Also, just one more note that this is our first film also on the site, or at least that we're covering on the podcast, that is in that 1939. 1939 is often considered the best year of film.
Yep.
We have a version of Mice of Men and Son of Frankenstein are some little ones, but we also had Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, The Wizard of Oz, Stagecoach, and Gone with the Wind.
big year.
The most successful movie of all time.
Yeah.
So big year for film.
So well, maybe chip away in 1939. Get some more time with the year then.
Well, let's jump to...
to quote Monty Python, now for something completely different. I can kind of kick this off, if that's cool.
I'm going to sit back.
Okay. That's good. I don't know. Maybe watch the movies on the side. Or This kicks off what will hopefully be a very strong summer of horror movies. This year already had the fantastic early entry in the genre with The First Omen. And 3 projects that have caught my eye over the next few weeks, or coming out in the next few weeks. Longlegs, sporting a great viral marketing campaign around Nick Cage. I've tried to stay away from it, actually, because it seems like everyone's kind of getting caught up in the hype of this, and I want to kind of contain my expectations of it. Cuckoo, which had me hooked since first hearing about it, and now MaXXXine. This belongs to the X trilogy, all starring Mia Goth, all directed, written, and edited by Ty West, and all produced by A24. So while it may seem like a pretty straightforward scary series, each is drastically different in its blend of horror. So much so that I was coming away from this saying, I'm really curious what fresh eyes, maybe not you, Tom,
Yep.
but a fan of horror.
I'm here for support.
What a fan of horror would walk away with if only tackling one of these. Because I feel like watching all 3, I don't know if I can fully recommend that, but each does definitely have its own strength and is a wildly different type of movie. As far
They
as
really
what it
can sit
blends.
on their own.
Yeah.
For being so close together coming out.
From X to MaXXXine, that is a direct sequel. Pearl is a prequel
Right.
to X.
Right,
So
okay.
X is kind of, though it's the first one, it's the middle slot, basically. They're just they're all just different. They're all horror blended with another style, which I felt was interesting, kind of tackling all of
And kind of
this.
refreshing, too.
Yeah.
And maybe an oversaturation of the market.
I think so. I think also that's where it's coming from, where it's like Ty West, he's got some interesting influences. And I'm curious to see what he does after this. I believe this is fairly successful with MaXXXine opening up. But yeah, interesting movies. And I was glad to cover them and glad that we kind of put the kibosh on it back in 2022 to wait for MaXXXine to
Yeah,
come
we could
out.
do all 3 together. Yep.
Exactly. So, with that said, we can get started in X. That sound good?
Yeah, man. Just jump right in.
So this was released in March of 2022, and in the early days of us getting the podcast off the ground, originally, like I said, we didn't cover this waiting for the full trilogy to come out, and I'm glad I did wait because I felt that this first entry was the weakest of the bunch. It acts as the anchor where the other 2 movies go, Pearl once again being a prequel, MaXXXine being a sequel. I am glad I kind of waited just to see where they were coming from because I feel like I could appreciate Ty West directing, writing, and editing. Editing as well kind of being an important piece to that.
Yeah.
X is a sex-driven slasher and is the most straightforward in the style blend that we will touch on for each of these. Takes place in 1979 Texas, which adds to the many, many nods to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and equally aiming for a mix of Southern grotesque and exploitation that was spawned from this era in horror. MaXXXine is a drifting porn actress that has got the X factor. And despite being a runaway with a dicey past, she's determined to become a big star. She travels with a ragtag film crew to a cabin to film a porno, led by Martin Henderson doing his best Matthew McConaughey impression, which isn't really good at all, but it's like really... I almost want to say, like, you just don't try if you can't get Matthew McConaughey. The old decrepit couple that is renting the cabin for them is disturbed by them in more than one way, however, as their youthful, sexy energy drives them into a dangerous longing for the past. The elderly wife, Pearl, seems fixated on MaXXXine, however, drawn in by jealousy, hatred, and possibly that mysterious X factor she has. Thematically, the satanic panic of the South is the contrast these porn stars are highlighted against. But as the story goes on, you untangle the anger these people might be cloaking their true desires. The movie explores a theme that goes in two directions, kind of lost innocence, but also longing for youth. Part of this is found in our young production assistant, played by Jenna Ortega, getting wrapped up into this porno. This alongside also the Scream Legacy sequels, locking her into other horror projects. Jenna Ortega as well, if that's still not ringing a bell, starring in the lead role for Wednesday, a Netflix series that got her a lot of notoriety. But also on the other end of the spectrum, with our geriatric kind of disturbing hosts, it kind of creates a dangerous desire for what our group of characters take for granted, their youth. And that's the conflict of it there. Acting-wise, though, this is no doubt Mia Goth's trilogy. Even by this point in her career, she has plenty of horror films under her belt. 2016's A Cure for Wellness is largely pretty bad, but mostly on Dane DeHaan's shoulders. 2018's Suspiria remake was pretty damn great. And in between this trilogy, we see her star in the madness that was Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool, which we covered on the podcast. And I think Mia Goth's brand is just unhinged.
Yeah.
She's
definitely fallen into a slot.
Yeah, batshit crazy. So, because, I mean, at least going back to her Infinity Pool review, that was pretty nuts. So, all of that aside, the real shout out here is her dual performance, playing not only the porn star MaXXXine, that we will continue with for the sequel, but also going under extensive makeup, playing the old lady Pearl, which is where we get the Pearl prequel. Now, I'll be honest, this was not something I really picked up while watching. I don't know. I mean, maybe
it was
call
that
me
good
dumb.
then.
Yeah, well, so I was just like, it's kind of whatever on this one. But nonetheless, it's impressive as a feat in her acting and as the center point of what we will get for a prequel about Pearl and then a sequel about MaXXXine. So that's where I kind of return to my opening note. Did I think this was the strongest movie? No. But in a lot of ways, this double performance makes it worth checking out, if only to get some of the homework done for two much better films to follow. I think the weakest part for me was the easiest to pull off, the slasher. I don't have any other experience with Ty West as a director, and certainly not at this level of involvement writing and editing as well. But all three of these movies have a real bad habit of their endings being much weaker than the start of their stories. And it kind of becomes disappointing because, especially for Pearl and MaXXXine, I feel like they start extremely strong, really propelling themselves into great. All three, just kind of, they have a hard time sticking the landing.
It's a bad thing to be known for.
Yeah. It also makes me say maybe one more writing credit on here.
Right.
Get someone from A24 to get a second look at this. So In this film specifically, it's at its worst. Leading up, there are a lot of great moments, especially around the desires of anyone that meets these porn actresses. Again, laying this groundwork of like hidden desires becoming dangerous. That's the vibe of the film. But once some of the killing starts, it really lost me how simple and stupid nearly all of the scenes were. I think it goes for shock value over all actual scares, but in some ways reminded me of a peer film in 2022, which was Barbarian, that kind of had a similar focus. That was it the smartest kind of slasher? Mm-hmm. No, but it did kind of focus on like, whoa, that I didn't expect that type of horror, if that makes sense. I think the key aspect here that loses me is unbelievable character logic. Those types of moments where you want to scream at the screen, not in terror, but in frustration. And that's kind of the wrap up on X. Folks, for that reason, I'm coming out kind of lukewarm on this. I think Ty West clearly has a huge passion for horror and thrillers, shown by what he's able to blend together for our next two films in a great way, too. But despite this setting, both of our key characters of MaXXXine and Pearl, it's still not able to escape its dusty cabin in the woods framework that he's trying to pay respects to. With that said, we're going to go ahead and give X 2022 a 57.
Oh, 57. Okay. Yeah, a little low. And I will say that's a lot lower than what some of the hype is online or for us, what some of the ratings online.
Yeah.
So this kind of brings it back down to earth for us.
Where I believe the consensus online is that X is the best one. Mm-hmm. I disagree. Not to give it away, but I mean this is the worst out of the three. I
Good.
think, so.
And I'm glad that you're saying that they also they are totally fine on their own too, so don't feel like you need to be beholden to the trilogy.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice.
Absolutely. Even to the point that with the sequel in MaXXXine, we'll touch on it a little bit, there's so many flashbacks that I feel like you're just going to kind of get the framework.
You can pick up on what's going on. Okay, so that was X 2022. Like Vin said, that came out in March or May, and then in September of 2022, Pearl comes out, and Pearl is a prequel.
Yes.
To X.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Directed by Ty West, all the stuff. Vin, take it away. Just keep going with it.
Yeah. Well, one of the main factors why I didn't cover this on release is because it looked like Ty West was doing something very, very unique with this trilogy, starting with Pearl. The second entry being a prequel, not for our main character, but arguably kind of like the villain of the first film. Like you said, later in the year, September 2022, the best hook for this is found in the implied sinister roots of our dear old grandma from the last film, recontextualizing the character's words and actions in every way. Stylistically, this was the most interesting of the three by far, and to the point that I really loved this film. Texas Chainsaw 70s porno vibes were perfect for the last film, but, well, I don't know if I would say perfect. They were good. They fit this story around exploitation, kind of like Dark Desires and whatnot. Right. Pearl, on the other hand, feels like it's stripped right out of a Golden Age Judy Garland film, like a musical almost, and then is twisted into a bloody slasher. Ty West has spoken extensively about how this film pulls from Technicolor classics such as Wizard of Oz. Hey, what do you know? You thought there was no connection.
Connective tissue, baby.
Wizard of Oz and Mary Poppins as his influence for this to kind of then pervert into a horror. So for what it's worth, it makes it wholly unique in tone for the horror to be paired with, and really an unforgettable experience at the hands of Mia Goth's truly insane performance. She is at her craziest here.
Really?
Without a doubt.
That's very interesting.
So good.
That's
good.
I mean, that's pretty cool. I love the fact that we're going all the way back. This film takes place in 1918.
1918.
Which is, I just think that's a very cool premise for a horror film.
Yeah.
You know, we're not dealing with werewolves. We're not dealing with, like, old stuff. This turn of the century, something in that time frame is kind of could be electric if you can capture that on camera at least.
Absolutely.
Make you feel the era.
Absolutely. If anything, I was getting kind of Hitchcock vibes as well from this.
Oh, I bet. That makes sense.
Just because of kind of pairing a psychopath with, older stylings and everything like that. So if there's one to check out, it is Pearl. I'm going to say that right now. Because this blend of style No, I'm telling you, there's nothing like it. I to my knowledge, and you
would know.
Exactly. I would hope I would know. Maybe it could be, slip of the mind. But let me tell you, I don't think anything combines these like dreams come true type of golden age Hollywood vibes,
right,
with horror, and in such a unhinged way at the hands of Mia Goth. Pearl is a slasher horror once again, but this time taking place on a Texas homestead in, like you said, Tom, 1918. Many details of the decades come into play, but most notably, a little bit of a smart production decision by setting it in 1918. The Spanish flu is in the background as an element, which serves as a clever way to work around COVID production restrictions filming a few years ago. So you do see some like cloth masks in it. And at first you say, I'm like, what is this, COVID? But by pairing it in 1918, Spanish flu kind of makes sense as far as the pandemic goes. So little interesting nugget. As the name suggests, we follow the deeply unstable Pearl, who wants to be the biggest star in the world, fueled by her equally difficult and boring home life taking care of her sick father. She escapes to a different reality with her fascination of motion pictures, daydreaming, and most of all severe delusions. Like, this girl does not see reality as it is. Like many during this time of hardship, she uses this escapism to avoid responsibility at home, mostly to get away from her stern German mother, that seemingly has no love for her. When Pearl gets wind of a dance audition to go on tour around the country, she sees it as her ticket out of obscurity and puts all of her eggs in one very fragile basket. I would say I'd hate to nitpick after throwing some praise to this, but I think there's one factor that does feel a bit confusing about watching this trilogy, and it's absolutely around the timeline here. Not only was this slightly confusing distinguishing between MaXXXine and Pearl as characters tied together by Mia Goth's performances and themes rather than like real continuity, it's just kind of difficult to track, I feel like, and that's why I was excited ultimately to cover these, to not only suggest little things like, hey, maybe just watch one that works for you stylistically, but also on top of that as well, like, make sense of it for myself. This was something I was naturally curious about in my own watching, so I feel like that's hopefully value for you folks at home to navigate this trilogy if you're interested in it. I'm not sure this adds a lot of value to our previous film X, either before or after, but if anything, after watching all three films, I think the biggest strength of Pearl is that it can absolutely stand on its own as an experience, and made me curious, once again, if watching this apart from the trilogy specifically was possible, or if that would be recommended.
Right.
I don't know. I'm in the position that I watch all three, so it's hard to kind of separate them, especially with Mia Goth basically being the same character in each of these. So difficult. I don't know. Any thoughts with that? Would you personally, horror-wise aside, be an advocate of watching one film in a trilogy of films? Only that.
Yes, if they stand alone enough, yes. And if I going into it know it's the best or something like that, I kind of like that this is the best one because this is the earliest. You know me, I would probably go chronological order. Almost.
Oh, sure.
So then I would start with Pearl, and I want to continue, jump to X, and then MaXXXine.
Yeah, I think that's my recommendation as well coming out of this.
So if you're saying that they stand alone enough, I'm cool with that. What I'm trying to think in my head, if I can even think of an example where I've done that before. I mean, the best thing I could think of is just jumping into a Marvel movie here or there.
Oh, true, because the continuity of it. Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, Yeah, I mean, maybe that. I'm sure there's others too, but
sure.
I think it's just okay if there's a clear enough cut.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, the style of this film is pretty smart, pairing wholesome dreams with a twisted reality. And the longer I sat reflecting on this experience, the more appreciation I had for the film. Blending the styles and genre is no stranger to horror, something that we even covered on or even touched on last week when we were covering Quiet Place, where there's a blend of sentimental vibes with horror. But to my knowledge, I can't think of anything that pulls off mixing a golden age vibe like this with horror. If anything, this commitment to the style reminds me a lot of the focus we saw in Late Night with the Devil, where the film never wavers in its experience it's trying to copy. Similarly, this film really doesn't waver in trying to I don't know, from color design on screen, from retro styling touches everywhere. It shows just great follow through on Ty West's part. We get retro screen wipes as the editing exclusively for this, whether it be like a Looney Tunes like circle coming in, or actual wipes, kind of a la Star Wars. The text used on screen is all flourish and old-fashioned, but most of all, the music is probably the best part of it because it feels like a silver-lined, dreamy score that could be stripped out of an old musical. And having that paired with this horror, and probably the best horror moments out of the trilogy, were just so cool. It was so awesome.
It's very cool. That is just very cool.
Yeah, it just the blend of style that Ty West was able to do here was just so impressive, and absolutely becomes why you should check out the movie. I would say the whole story centers around dreams, delusions, all driven to insanity. And Mia Goth really did a fantastic job in this, able to be fully unhinged. I mean, I don't think I can come up with a different word besides unhinged. The door is off the hinges. and just, wow, is she just batshit crazy in this? Because the character's story is basically a closed loop as well, I feel like she was able to kick this madness into overdrive. Most of all, she's just given incredible breathing room to do long takes where she goes from having a shell that she presents on the outside to showing cracks in that mental state to completely revealing her true self underneath that shell, and where that mental state is able to fluctuate wildly, all without breaking scene. I'm telling you, this was. I'm surprised this didn't get maybe even some critical buzz when this came out in 2022.
Wow. Do you think it's burdened because it's A24 too? So a lot of people often have a lens to A24.
Sure.
But do you think it's the fact that 2 came out in the same year?
I think so.
Is it just, and it kind of got swept under?
Or just heady? Like a diluted, or people like me were just saying, I'll just wait for the trilogy to finish.
Yeah.
I mean, if he came out with one, less than 6 months later or whatever.
Right.
Well, how long is the last one going to be? Well, it turns out it's 2 years later. So maybe you forget about this film. But yeah, it just the combination of Mia Goth's performance and just wonderful long takes of just zero edit, camera still, focusing on her, going from sociopathic type of vibes where she's putting on an act, and seeing that crack more and more as the camera is not breaking, as the magnifying lens is lasering in on her more and more. Man, it was really great to see. That on top of this, one of these one takes is for a pretty awesome credit sequence, which just like, again, I mean, like, I think before watching Mia Goth films, mainly these 3 and Infinity Pool, I was kind of annoyed by her. I was like, what is this? I was just like, I wasn't about her. I kind of found her to be annoying. Wow. I mean, this girl can act.
Totally turned around.
Like, she can act a lot more than, I don't know. I mean, like, this credit sequence alone, just like not even verbally acting, just, wow, just uncut and unhinged. And while there are a good handful of performances here, such as a role for David Corenswet, who is cast as the new Superman, I'm happy to say this is once again Mia Goth's show, and in my opinion, her best acting role yet, which is worth checking out whether you're interested in the full trilogy or not. We're going to go ahead and give Pearl a 76.
Okay, 76.
Yeah.
Good movie. I guess I was expecting maybe 80s. I mean, you're very hot on this, which I like. I mean, I'm glad that you're... there's some actually decent horror that you can enjoy this year.
There's some decent horror. Like I said, there's
I guess, yeah.
There's a little bit there of just like the ending of all 3 of these.
Just brings it down a bit.
There's
too
a
much.
sprained ankle. It's not a full dismount to each one, and each one is a little bit different. Like I said with X, it's just kind of boils down to, wow, this is trying to be a cool, an interesting slasher.
Right.
Turns out it's just kind of a slasher.
Okay.
With like dumb characters. Right. Here, I don't want to give away too much because it is a pretty wild ride. But once again, I was even watching MaXXXine this week, and I said to myself, I was like, wow, man, I loved where this was starting. Mm-hmm. Why am I not in love with it? I almost like self-reflected, like what am I not seeing now towards the end?
Interesting. Just tapers off a bit.
Yeah.
Well, still 76 for an A24 horror. budget. Pearl, I mean, check it out.
Yeah.
If you're into the genre, basically, that's what this is saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's a really good movie, 76%.
I would even go to say that Pearl is something to jump into even if you have a passing, appreciation of horror. Maybe you just like thrillers and you're not into that full horror
Sure,
vibe.
yeah.
This had a psychological spin in such a way, and through Mia Gough's performances, most importantly. So
Excellent. Okay. Well, hey. All right, so that's Pearl with 76%, and Mia Goth, 2 movies coming out next year. So one is Blade, and the other one is Frankenstein.
Oh.
Directed by Guillermo del Toro.
Your favorite.
So, but we'll see how creepy that is or weird it is. But
Yeah, and we'll see if Blade happens at all.
Could just be super Thor.
Yeah,
That's true, too.
I think Mahershala Ali just dropped, so I don't know.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah,
But she's got 2 at least in the works, at least for next year. So,
Man.
Before we get on to our final film, we don't really have a producer for this episode. But last week, Maxwell Farnsworth produced, gave Vin a movie ticket, and we said, hey, he didn't write a note in. So we said, hey, write a producer note in. We'll read it this week. So Max did send a note in. We want to honor that. And Max writes, love the show. I've been out and about living a homeless life as of late, and your show is a bright point in my week that I look forward to every Thursday.
Well, that's value add right there.
I enjoyed the animation episode recently as it fell onto one of 2 types of episodes that I feel are very much a strong point for the podcast. Those 2 types are Vin likes each movie and Vin doesn't like any of the movies. Those 2 types of episodes are always a joy for me. Since I enjoyed the animation episode so much, it had me thinking of other animated films I'd like to hear Vin review. I know it's a long shot, and I have no expectation of follow-through on your end. But South Park, Bigger, Longer, Uncut.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh, definitely on the list for sure.
And the triplets of Belleville?
Actually on the list.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, on the list.
Those are all favorites of mine, and I love to hear Vin's take.
Wow.
Tom, get your shoes in order. Hey, I'm working on it.
He is.
Max, thank you so much for producing last week. Anyone out there, if you want to be a producer of the daily ratings, we're completely producer supported. So basically, how you become a producer is you donate into the show. So you head to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com, and it's all right there for you, whether you want to do credit card, debit card, PayPal, Venmo, Satoshis, if you're podcasting 2.0, kind of, it's all there. We have all the ways. If you want to donate, it's all the ways that you can. So basically, how we do it is it's a value for value model. That's kind of what Vin and I are going off of. We're not going to have any advertising. We're not going to have tier structures, paywalls, no Patreon, where there's different pay levels. It's not pay to play or pay to access our content here. Everything we have, we just offer it. It's out there in the ether. It's there for you, so technically free. But if you're enjoying the podcast and listening, and if you're using the website and enjoying that, well, then that's value in your pocket. We ask you, can you give us value back in our pocket? It's a value for value model. So we have some fun set donations on there. So, for instance, Max last week bought Vin a movie ticket. You could be the Gump Club. You could become a Godfather, kind of fun set donations. But right there, you'll see the big button of value for value button, and that's whatever amount you want. If you didn't buy a cup of coffee this week, or your finances are different every week, so basically you can peg anything you want, send it our way. When you send a donation in our way, be sure to send in a producer note as well. You can email us at tom.vin@thedailyratings.com. So you can email a note, whether it be questions, comments, critiques, ask us anything segment, whatever you want. If you're going to be a producer, if you're going to donate, we want to honor that, and we want to hear what you have to say as well. It's important. So again, it's thedailyratings.com. Head to the donations tab. Max, thanks, man. Again, you were a producer last week of episode 141. And if you want to be a producer of 143, just head to thedailyratings.com. All right, Vin, with that, let's keep moving. Well, actually, I guess, did we have enough time on that? So Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the list.
Yep.
And Triplets of Belleville,
yeah,
which
on
I just
the list.
never heard of.
Yeah, on the animation list.
Full animation or half and half?
I believe full animation. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, of course, split. But
Zemeckis, right?
Zemeckis, and then obviously we covered with Thief and the Cobbler, the animated talent behind it. So that's some good connective tissue. I mean, I think Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's not rated on the site.
Right.
I haven't seen it in years. I feel like I'm going to be very hot on that film when I finally watch it again, because I feel like my adult brain is able to appreciate all the little film tricks that they've done,
right,
combining animation and whatnot. Well, and I'm already kind of sucker for that. I mean, we gave Space Jam 1 a good score, so
It's true. Not Space Jam 2.
yeah, not
And
Space
it's
Jam
very
2.
Zemeckis because he's all about the new tech.
Yes.
I mean, he's almost like just bring up Hitchcock again. He's
Yeah,
okay to try
yeah.
out all the new crap.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should pair Roger Rabbit when that new Zemeckis film comes out where they de-age Robin Wright and Tom Hanks.
Oh, yes, I just saw
It's like
this.
a love note to Forrest Gump a little bit.
I just saw this. Yeah, maybe we do Forrest Gump as well.
Maybe. But anyway, okay, Max, thank you so much for the note. Let's keep things going. So this is now in theaters, like you said, Vin. It took 2 years to kind of finish off this trilogy. I don't know if you want to get into what happened in that time or why 2 years or whatever, or let's just talk about MaXXXine with 3 X's. Again, directed by Ty West.
Yep.
Why don't you break it down for us?
Well, folks, jumping forward 2 years later for the production, to answer your question, I don't really know. Besides just giving it some breathing room,
Just time,
gaining money as well after what was previously shot, and I can imagine as well there was maybe a little bit of a panic in trying to produce Pearl under COVID restrictions as well. But you can feel how nearly every aspect of this film has been amped up in those 2 years, from cast to set pieces, and maybe above everything else, a heavy licensed music soundtrack. MaXXXine is looking to close this trilogy with a big bang.
Everyone's in this movie.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
It's unreal, and really unexpected too. Really unexpected. The critical success of the last 2 films has given Ty West a lot of room to work with for his vision, especially when it comes to yet another switch up in the horror style blend. He's now, I would say, I haven't watched his work besides the trilogy, but kind of maybe his trademark of taking horror and then just blending it with something else in any direction. And I have to say, walking into this week, I didn't really see what the hype was about, but after watching this trilogy, I think Ty West has an eye for picking out unexpected influences for his films, which makes me excited for what comes next. Makes me excited to see what is he going to tackle, maybe just for a single entry project. This was obviously very big scope with the trilogy, the interweaving of Mia Goth's performance and kind of themes and everything like that. I'm really excited to see what comes next for him because more than anything, I think I could appreciate where he's coming from with a lot of these influences. I feel like Ty West could be, like a friend of the podcast. Maybe not when he hears my scores, but I feel like he is able to pull from such interesting sources, and you can see that so clearly in the DNA of his films. For this closing chapter of the X trilogy, its setting and time period dictate the style pairing or that blend a lot more than before. Where previously horror has been front and center, this feels like the whole experience is kind of dialed back to a very, very violent thriller. We, yet again, ditched 2 very different vibes of the previous films, but this time the style blend feels like it's less mixing with a genre and more like it's paying respects to very one specific director. With MaXXXine being set in the 80s now, this feels identical to some of the Brian De Palma thrillers that we covered earlier in the year, where sex and violence and mystery blur together. And boy, was I fucking right. It was right on the money, Tom. All over this movie are countless. Kind of in a cool way, though.
Okay.
We weren't the biggest fan.
We were not the biggest fans. Those who were listening to the Palma episodes.
Yeah.
Vin and I were kind of annoyed.
Yeah. It was just like, this again? But seeing it done in a way that it's being kind of paid homage to was interesting. There are countless nods that I wouldn't have picked up if we didn't do our De Palma study, and really a moment that I was happy we do the podcast, Tom, because I don't know if I would stick with those De Palma movies after the fact.
Right.
Maybe, we stumble upon 2 or whatever, but like actually sticking with it and going through it, even though they weren't the best scores. I was kind of needlessly shitting on one
films,
of the
by the way, too, to go through.
Oh, right.
But we did those 4 early ones from him, yeah. And we every week, yeah. I was really, really happy that I did the homework, basically, without even realizing it was homework. I won't spoil some of the more cooler moments in which, the De Palma shtick
actually kind of comes off a bit better, honestly. I mean, that may be, kind of sacrilegious to say about, one of the new Hollywood directors. But 3 times, count them, 3 times throughout the film, we get a whole split screen montage. I was just like,
oh, wow, that brings you right back.
Oh, my God.
Brings you right back.
He's doing it. So, MaXXXine sets us 6 years after the events of X in 1985, and like I said, is definitely still a horror, but leans towards De Palma's thriller and an 80s revenge flick mixed with it. We finally depart from the backwoods of Texas, this time set in a kind of hyper-stylized satanic L.A., dripping with neon and buzzing with news of a black leather-gloved killer simply called the Night Stalker. What does that sound like? That sounds like not Body Double. The one with Michael Caine. Michael Caine was the black glove killer.
Is that Body Double?
Yeah, no.
No, Dressed to Kill.
Yeah, Dressed to Kill. Maxine Minx is a bona fide name in porn by this point, and still not willing to accept the life that she doesn't deserve. Now, she tries to break into a big horror movie production within the film. Her past begins to haunt her, including blackmailing around what happened 6 years back on that lonely Texas farm. I personally love the 80s hyperviolence angle here. The news morbidly running off of the mentality of if it bleeds, it leads. Hollywood being known as extremely dangerous after nightfall, especially for any kind of pretty girl. And seriously, the nods to De Palma don't stop. The fake horror production feels stripped right out of 1984's Body Double. The film producing techniques are an angle used to amp up the horror. She has to take a head mold at one point, which is obviously like a claustrophobic type of thing to imagine. But like Body Double, using these film tricks to craft the horror. The film also feels very close to Blowout from 1981, not to mention this kind of like blackmail point or plot point. This does, however, come with a heavy, heavy hand of Hollywood nostalgia and slightly becomes overdone after a while. I think this shows an ugly face when it comes to some of the set pieces used repeatedly, which I won't give away, but it kind of was just like a little overkill, I guess is where I'm coming from. Really, this 80s nostalgia, this Hollywood nostalgia, it's all over the film and kind of is one of the factors that leads towards the stumbled ending. 1980s-wise, the licensed soundtrack becomes a bit much here. Totally falls into the Forrest Gump syndrome, speaking of Zemeckis. So
it's just bang, 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 bang.
Bang, bang, bang. A shame, too, because I'm forgetting the composer's name, but like Ty West, the composer is tied to all 3 of these projects, and after the score being a huge highlight in Pearl, I was kind of excited to what kind of synthy lines we get in this. But it's a lot, and I mean a lot of licensed music.
Yeah, Tyler Bates does the music for this,
That's right.
And he's kind of up and coming. Tyler Bates does some interesting projects.
Yeah.
For the first 2 films, it was also Chelsea Wolfe was also credited.
Okay.
But Tyler Bates is on MaXXXine.
Sure. One major upgrade for the sequel is a much, much bigger cast, which, once again, in a way, kind of shows it was worth waiting for the hype to build over 2 years, whether that's even just actors interested in this project. The music artist Halsey continues Ty West's tradition of working with music stars. Kid Cudi was also starring in the first film as well.
Executive producing this, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So he's got ties somewhere. We also get some surprising additions, including Giancarlo Esposito, Michelle Monaghan, and Bobby Cannavale. But most of all, holy shit, Kevin Bacon is great in this.
Oh, yeah?
He's so good.
Oh,
He's
fantastic.
my favorite part about this.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He plays this, like, sleazy blackmailer that we get introduced to pretty quickly, and is just the type of character you love to hate. Like, there's the villain just chewing the scenery. He's got these gold canine teeth in. he talks like this Southern gentleman. Man, it was the best part of the movie for
Really?
me. Yeah.
Wow, that's good, because Kevin Bacon was really losing stock for me.
Oh, really?
So it's good to hear at least.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to watch the film.
Yeah. And I also don't know if this would be the kind of film to gain stock with you. But yeah, he was just like a great little villain in this, and man, just the type of villain you just love to hate.
He heightened the film.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Absolutely.
Real quick, though.
Yeah.
So my boy is in this.
Oh.
Hidden boy. Secret boy, almost.
Hidden boy.
So I'm just going to say, did the coroner stick out at all as a character?
Oh, it's Toby
Huss.
Yes! I recognized him from Cop Shop.
Okay.
I mean, I spotted him right away. I was actually, I mean, slight spoiler, I was hoping he was going to be like the big villain, actually. He was just on the inside or something. But no, it's a real quick appearance. He says one line and then he's
Damn
out.
it.
Yeah,
he needs to be bigger than he is.
Yeah.
By the way,
I'm rooting for Toby Huss too. He gets promoted to actual boy.
He needs to be bigger.
Yeah.
I believe he played, and this is going way back. Forgot to mention it when we covered it, and I only watched the first hour of the film. But he was almost so unrecognizable because I think he just might be a very good actor. In Blonde.
Oh.
Okay. Do you remember her makeup stylist?
No.
It was a guy.
Really?
He did like his hair and makeup, and he kind of seemed gay, but he also just seemed like crazy and a bit of a creep.
And that's Toby Huss.
And that was Toby Huss.
Yeah, he's got that lisp to it.
And it was great. And he's great in the show, in AMC show *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a great underrated show. You know, that's in that peak where AMC is just crushing it.
Yeah, that good rhythm.
Yeah, he's just good. He's just good at what he is. And then you watch Cop Shop.
Cop Shop, he's incredible in Cop Shop. He's like, he once again kind of makes it. So.
Anyway, Toby.
Oh, man, Toby. Yeah. I'm glad that you caught that. Now, for the recommendation here, this is much more of a tied-in sequel than I would have expected coming off of Pearl. And I don't know. I once again, I kind of flip-flop back and forth. I think X could be required watching here. That's kind of just like the logical conclusion of just, hey, you're watching the trilogy, watch the trilogy. Though I didn't love how much this story focuses on connecting the dots of MaXXXine's history. I know that maybe sounds a little bit odd, but I feel like this film was almost burdened by trying to make sure every question on the list of the prior two horrors was crossed off. And I feel like horror doesn't need to do that. Horror can be a little bit unanswered and actually be elevated because of that. It makes me wonder how confident A24 was in audiences seeing the first film too, as this does have, like the nostalgia, like a heavy-handed soundtrack, this has a heavy dose of Flashback City for nearly the whole runtime. And once again, kind of took away from the experience.
It breaks it up.
Breaks it up. I don't really love, heavy-handed flashbacks. And these flashbacks were burdened with not only flashing back to X, but then earlier parts in the film for the mystery thriller aspect. And I was just like, I don't know, too much. So I feel like the reason why I kind of point the finger at A24 is because I wonder if Ty West's editing decisions were influenced by some reasonable marketing kind of notes from the studio and saying, hey, I mean, this 2 years later, the naming convention is all over the place. You know what I mean? Audiences already need, training wheels.
When that's a good point to say, yeah.
So it just kind of made me wonder, but either way, detracted from the film a tiny bit. And really not to end on a sour note, but much like I felt with X, I feel like this didn't entirely stick the landing. As this movie starts up, it comes out swinging. I feel like Mia Goth's performance is excellent. There are a few very intense scenes that just like capture such a new energy for the trilogy. Once again, just like being a shining example of like, wow, Ty West is able to take this character and basically the same arc of wanting to be a star and just making such a drastically different type of film. And having a lot of respect for that. But it's just, after that first half, there's something that kind of slips and slips and slips. Part of this is revealed in the writing, giving Mia Goth, fantastic scenes towards the beginning of the film, showing that unhinged magic she brings to the character, but then oddly making her kind of take a back seat towards the end to make room for some super campy elements that frankly felt much lower in quality compared to the other 80s influences peppered in the film. This film kind of gets a little silly towards the end, and you can say, well, it's trying to be like this 80s revenge flick. It can get a little silly, get a little campy. But there was something about it that I feel like it dipped too much in one direction and kind of critically ruined the moment that Mia Goth was supposed to have, you know?
Right, yeah. I mean, it sounds like this gets off the rails a little bit too much. It doesn't stay on the tracks that makes it electric.
Yeah.
It just deviates way too much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If anything, towards the ending, or I would say, last 30 minutes, solid. There's even the focus of pulling from just De Palma flicks kind of gets muddy, and it's just like, all right, well, this is clearly pulling from like a lot of like 80s B movies, so
right
for the style, but loses focus, and loses focus most critically on Mia Goth. So my final recommendation is probably to watch the trilogy in chronological order if you're going to watch all of them. Starting with Pearl not only lets you watch the best movie first to see if it hooks you, see if you got skin in the game, but also gives an idea of Mia Goth's wonderful performances in all three of these films and how like really crazy she is, and totally turned me around to be a fan. And above everything, if Mia Goth is why you are hooked, then continuing on to see how MaXXXine's story plays out is probably worth your time. We're going to go ahead and give MaXXXine a 67.
Okay, 67. Not a bad score. Not a bad score.
Yeah.
So these are okay. 57, 67, 76. So it's interesting. So I think you gave it's. I like that we really covered these on one podcast. Okay, because people can just go to this, kind of get your feelings for it, and make their own decision. But definitely, if you're in the horror camp and looking for new horror, there's something here.
Absolutely.
To be checking out.
Absolutely. Can't say, at least for this year, MaXXXine being the only release this year, can't say it goes side by side with how I introduced this segment of really praising the horror that has come out this year with First Omen and hopefully Longlegs and hopefully Cuckoo.
Right.
But I still think it was a solid movie. And folks, if you watched any of the De Palma flicks, you're going to have a depreciation. Yeah, I'm telling you, you're going to walk away and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. So, because I definitely did. And not saying that even affects my thoughts on the film, but there was, it was inspired in a lot of ways. So.
Excellent. Well, I mean, really, I'm glad that we covered these. The naming is weird and makes it confusing for people, so that's not lovely. So remember, it's within this trilogy, in order they came out, it goes X, Pearl, MaXXXine. If you want to watch these films in order, it goes Pearl, X, MaXXXine. Yeah. And that's MaXXXine with 3 X's. Yeah. Excellent, Vin. I mean, looking at these, anything else you want to end on, touch on, or roll credits? Anything coming up next week?
Well, next week we have Longlegs. We also have Fly Me to the Moon, which people online have been dragging and bashing because it looks like an AI film. So I guess we'll...
No.
Really?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Fly Me to the Moon is Scarlett Johansson.
And
Channing
Tatum.
And
I don't know.
Ray Romano. So you bet your ass you're going to be watching it.
And who is bigger than both of those stars? And
well, by net worth, certainly. So yes, so we're ecstatic for next week. And, of course, we're going to continue John Wayne July. Do you want to give the movie if people want to follow along?
Yes. We are going to be doing another favorite of mine and a favorite of yours as well, Red River.
Red River D.
The Red River D. And then a little bit of a reduced slot. We're not going to be doing 5. I do want to squeeze in El Topo, which is a Western by the infamous Jodorowsky, who we covered on in the Dune episode, and it is apparently his first film before Holy Mountain, but it's not as crazy. It's just a Western. So hopefully to squeeze that in next week, because I definitely, though it's John Wayne July, I still got a normal Western list that I would like to chip away at, and that's definitely one that I'm curious
about. It's July. It's dusty out there. We're going to put those chaps on and go for a ride. Excellent, Vin. And yeah, that Red River film, great movie. It's another early John Wayne. Yeah. So I'd like kind of, I always look at John Wayne as early, mid, and late. And I know you can do that with any actor, but for him, even just aesthetically looking, we're still in early John Wayne. One of the first films for Montgomery Clift, too. One of like the original kind of like the handsome actors, kind of before Paul Newman, before Steve McQueen.
Interesting.
That kind of stuff. So
yeah, I'm hoping to kind of come away with a similar reflection on John Wayne's career after a couple Julys.
It's going great. It is going great so far. 10 years. I've just been dying. Okay, Vin, thank you so much for watching these 4 films here. Thanks for rating them and stopping by here tonight, talking about them. And folks at home will run it down one more time. So we have Stagecoach with an 81%, and 2 shoes, 1 lace. We have X with the 57, Pearl with the 76, MaXXXine with the 67. Sorry, and folks, we hope you enjoyed this show, and we hope to see you next week as well on the Daily Ratings Podcast. And hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or get the word out and tell a friend about us. And just a reminder that the Daily Ratings is completely producer supported. We want to stay away from advertising, and we don't want to have any paywalls or tier structures or subscriptions. It's all just value for value. So, are you finding value in any of the things that we're doing here at the Daily Ratings? Then become a producer and donate whatever amount of value that is. Just go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. And while you're there, be sure to check out the massive amount of films that Vince has rated. So thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast.